All right, awesome. Um, this is going to be a little bit different from our normal meetings. So during our resumes and interviewing workshop, we had a similar panel type discussion at the end, where we basically kind of did a fireside chat kind of thing and took your questions as they came in. And you guys overwhelmingly said you guys would like a whole workshop. Yeah. So tonight we're basically going to be doing a sort of fireside chat sort of thing where it's not really about any one specific topic, but just a lot of various things that would have been really nice to know when we were underclassmen. So again, this isn't going to be a typical workshop where you have one person talking in front of some slides the whole time. We might have a few graphics here and there, but it's really going to be discussion based. And you guys are as welcome to be a part of the discussion as us. So if you have any questions, experiences, anything you'd like to share, feel free to share it because we've got plenty of time to work with here. We're not really rushing against the schedule or anything like that. Also, for my panel people here, this is give me 1 second. Yeah, by a pointer, I'm just using my personal mouse. There we go. All right, so one of the topics I kind of like wanted to open up with was basically the idea of school and time management. So I think we all know, you've probably heard it from all different clubs you've been in. To get ahead as a CS student, there is a lot of different things that you need to do. So, we've been through all this before, right? Classes, CS classes are crazy enough in of itself. I just got out of like a 2-hour exam on the way coming over here for like intro to graphics class, basically, uh, which was a lot in itself. And on top of all that, you got to get your projects right. You got to learn the skills you need to do these projects. Maybe constantly updating your resume, getting your LinkedIn right. And we all have different levels of personal responsibilities. Some of us might have family or friends that we need to tend to. Some of us might have jobs that we're working outside of our classes to pay our way through school. So, we've got a lot on our plates. And everyone tells you need to do all this, but no one ever tells you, how are you going to manage it? Because frankly, there's only 24 hours in a day. And sometimes things have to get cut. So, okay, I basically had a list of some things that we could start off with, but would any officers like to share advice regarding this first? Or I can. Oh, yeah, actually, that was. I took it. I took that for granted. Yeah. So hi, I'm Jonas. I'm the president. You probably, if you've been to any SSD meetings before, you know who I am. I'll
Okay. Hi, hi, my name is Blake, original founder of SSD. I graduated master's a year and a half ago. So I work in industry remotely as a software developer. So good chunk of experience there. And yeah, undergrad, master's here, and a whole lot of other more fun and suffering. So,
I'm Param. I'm the program officer. I'm in grad school right now.
are we convinced this is working? I am not convinced this is working. There we go. Yeah.
Nice. All right. I'm Angel Lopez. You might already know me as the outreach officer of SSD that's just like schizo posting across the announcements board. I'm a 4th-year computer science student. I went from aerospace engineering to computer science on my 3rd year, I believe. But I've always been pretty much interested in like coding ever since I started off with like Minecraft mods and commands. I was an intern at Grafana Labs this past summer, which was a lot of fun. And I'm also currently interning as an associate software engineer at Emerging Tech LLC here in Gainesville.
So yeah, these two are actual engineers here, aerospace and the hardware stuff. So yeah, I want to go ahead and now we know who everyone is. Everyone on this board here is a senior or older. So, some credentials there. We know what we're talking about. So coming back to the issue of time management, again, we've got a whole bunch of responsibilities we need to get through. No one ever really tells you how to prioritize them. So number one, there we go. So things you want to do. So again, prioritize ruthlessly. Now, I don't know where this phrase came from. I've heard it was coined at Facebook or something like that. I might not be sure. But the idea of ruthless prioritization means that if you have a lot of things that you need to get done, you need to basically order them by importance and think, yes, this might all seem important, but if something has to get cut, what is that something going to be? Now, and this might be unthinkable for a lot of other degrees, oftentimes in computer science, that might maybe be coursework. Now, I'm not saying don't do your projects or don't do your homework. You need to pass, and your GPA needs to be decent, especially if you're not sure what path you'll take. I imagine most of us are planning to go straight into industry after we graduate, but some people here might want to go to grad school, and your GPA is important in that case. But for most of us, you don't need to have a 4.0. And so not studying as hard for an exam because you're spending your time learning an industry relevant skill instead, or you have a project that you're trying to get done before you go to a career fair or something like that, it might be of higher priority for you. So don't stress about being a perfectionist in school, for example, because that's definitely something where the more effort you put in my experience, the more your returns start to diminish. So again, you really need to kind of think sometimes what, in terms of importance of things you need to do, can you cut out the most? Because if you say what's important, you might think it's all important. What can you most afford to lose is a good way of framing it, in my view.
Yeah, and just to reiterate on what Jonas said, knowing what it is that you can cut out of like your priorities list is hugely important. And this reminds me of something like really huge that I didn't consider to be as huge in back when I was like freshman, sophomore. But during that time, most of the time you're taking like really general, relatively easy classes, right? Like stuff that, I mean, for some, Calc 1 might not be the easiest, Calc 2 might not be the easiest, or like any of the gen ed critical tracking credits that you take early on might not be easy. But if it is easy to you, don't slack off on those classes because they serve to buffer your GPA for when you actually need to prioritize stuff later on in your academics. I cannot tell you how many times I've had really great opportunities career-wise and internship-wise slip away from me, or even hackathons that I couldn't go to just because I couldn't sacrifice one assignment. Not telling you guys to sacrifice one assignment in particular, but just know that even though college tells you, oh, you have to get like perfects on everything, you can't miss an assignment, that is a tool in your arsenal that you have. And for most people here, the point of going to college is to secure a career in the future, right? Your GPA is not going to matter 10 years, not even 5 years down the line, most likely, once you have your first actual industry position. So prioritizing stuff in the future really comes at the leeway of, I guess, the leverage that you've built for yourself early on, especially with those easy classes. So definitely a good point on Jonas's part, and I wanted to reiterate that.
Yeah, I think you pretty much covered that. I don't have a whole lot to add that's gonna do anything.
I do have one specific thing on that note. One thing that's really helpful is knowing your class's late policies, because that can vary very widely, and it could also be a big advantage to you. Some classes, such as programming 2, for example, are super strict about late work, right? I think like you only get one late assignment for the whole class, and it's like half off points. Classes like that, you want to maybe prioritize higher than your classes that do have looser late policies, because sometimes you're just going to have points where everything is due on the same day. And, ideally, we'll tell you start early in advance, but sometimes life doesn't go that way, especially with programming where you can maybe have an assignment where you get most of it working in 2 hours and then spend the next 4 hours trying to find one random bug that happened on the last feature. So, sometimes stuff happens. But sometimes you'll have professors who might give you really lax late policies. Sometimes it might only take off 10% or 20% of per day late. And that is something that you really need to take to your advantage because again, if you have multiple things that are coming up at the same time, how do you decide what's going to get cut? Well, what's going to hurt you the least? Again, a big part of managing your time is knowing what you can get away with.
Also, shout out to Goatmez, operating systems teacher. He actually does not take off late points during the weekends, especially, for example, like for Project One system calls. If you didn't submit that on Friday and you submitted it on Sunday night at 11:59 p.m., he wouldn't take off points because those are not like business days of the school. So definitely a cool class, definitely a cool policy that the teacher has. Wish a lot more classes did that. That would be awesome. But unfortunately, there's only one Gomez. So
Yeah, Gomez is very, very nice guy. Can second that. Again, guys, if you have like any of your own experiences or questions with anything, again, we're not really rushing through slides or anything today, so it's not going. Okay. Now there we go. All right. So the second thing here, do your research on professors and classes. So obviously, Angel was just talking about Professor Gomez. All of you will have him because he's the only operating systems teacher right now. But oftentimes you will have choices, right? Sometimes certain different professors might be teaching a class in different semesters. Very rarely you could have the same class available at the same time with two different professors, although it's usually based on semester. But the idea is you want to get an idea of what classes you need to take as far in advance as possible, basically. Figure out who's teaching them and then learn as much as you can about those professors as possible. Because a bad professor can ruin your life, basically. They can give you really hard exams, grade you really hardly, give you a ton of homework that makes you feel like you're spending 50% of your time focused on just one class. But a good professor could also make you motivated to go to class more, study harder, become really invested in the subject. So you want to use all the tools at your disposal. Number one is asking upperclassmen, right? If you ask like any of us SSD officers, hey, have you taken a class with so-and-so professor? You know, we'll be glad to tell you any knowledge you might have, especially if we've taken it before. And likewise, if there's some not so great details, we'd also be happy to tell you. And it's not just us, you know, making sure you know some upperclassmen who are able to tell you this stuff can be really helpful, especially because some places like Rate My Professor, they can be very helpful. But sometimes if you're looking for a class that is an elective, for an example, and the professor doesn't teach full time, you might not know a lot about them. So again, try to get to know some upperclassmen. Will really help you out there.
Also, it's easier to make a connection with professors than you might think. So always like in a class, if you think it's a good professor and you want to work with them, you should make an effort to like talk to them, go to the office hours, show them that you're good at that topic. So that might help you to get a job as a TA/peer mentor, which is going to be really helpful for your resume.
One thing I'll chime in too. If anyone knows Aline Dobra, he is one heck of a professor. His classes are weird to say the least. He just like his style is different than anything else. I found it worked great for me because for the most part, you just kind of like do the thing and you get an A. So that's not to say you can't breeze through his class, though you may be able to. However, I think I've taken like 7 or 8 classes with him, right? Like you know, an absurd number of classes for things. And so some of that was lucky also because he was my advisor for some things. So I got to pad the stats on that a bit. But you know, you might find a professor that really clicks with you on things, and that's a good thing to kind of look out for, right? You know, people always talk about learning styles and teaching styles and whatever else. And whatever you might categorize things are, people do good in some situations and people do less good in other situations. So find things that work for you and see if you can pay attention to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to Param's point actually. definitely reach out to professors, definitely see what they got going on. You'd be surprised the amount of professors here that are actually doing like active research and looking for students. I was talking with Brian about HCI earlier. Professor Sharon is actually working on like HCI research literally this semester, and she was also looking for students last semester. Another case example, Professor Aman, like I'm pretty sure like maybe like last year or maybe a couple semesters ago, he was literally having students build an entire like online assessment platform, kind of like HackerRank, but specifically for UF. And the repository is out there on GitHub. If you like dive deep enough into like all the UF people working there, or like all the UF students working there. I know Megan Estrada is one person that I actually interned with at Emerging Tech, and she was actually actively working on that now. Was working on that. And yeah, definitely reach out to professors, see what kind of research they got going on. I know actually for full stack IoT, a class that I'm taking right now, John Lewis, who is actually a PhD student here at UF, was doing some amazing research on accessible ballots or accessible online voting systems that actually are transparently show you your ballot being created in real time as you put in your ballot information. So say that you vote for, dang, I was gonna say Barack Obama, but like that's like I'm still living a couple of years ago. But like say you vote for Barack Obama, right? It's actually gonna print out the paper with Barack Obama's like I voted for Barack Obama right on it. That's the kind of research that they're doing, and there's a lot of professors doing amazing research that aren't just great bullet points on your resume, but are actually like meaningful projects that will help you build experience in like a specific domain. And then another thing that I wanted to add, oh my gosh, I'm blanking out, and it was related to professors in class. Oh yeah, on Jonas's point about asking upperclassmen, you don't even have to have friends that are upperclassmen. Believe me, I had no friends that were upperclassmen. Just ask around on Discord, club Slacks, club Discords, anything, right? You'd be surprised how many people want to absolutely just slam their professor after a semester and be like, this professor sucks. He did this and that, and he gave me 20 late points. Like, it's actually crazy. So especially with like stuff like the UF Computer Science Discord, which is one of the biggest Discords here. I'm pretty sure it's part of like the Society of PC Builders Monopoly, got like 2,000 students on it, right? Just ask around. They have specific Discord channels for each class as it comes out every semester. And you can even see past messages of people that previously took the class. And you can even see some answers for projects that you're actively working on. So definitely 100% leverage Discord as a tool in your arsenal, leverage Slack. And even through there, even if you don't find out what you're looking for, you can meet new people and yeah, just have fun on Discord pretty much. Yeah.
Along the lines of researching your professors in your classes, if you do well in that topic, your first topic there with the prioritize is going to you're going to have a lot easier time prioritizing because a lot of these classes, for example, signals and systems is a big one for that. Dr. Harvey is really a great professor and the other one's not. And what that ends up happening is when you're in class in signals and systems, you're going to learn all the material and you're going to do your homework in an hour and it's not going to be that hard. And everybody else who's in the other class isn't going to be able to have the same luxury as that. They're going to spend an hour learning the material outside of class, along with being in class, and then another hour, if they're lucky, doing the homework. And then they also have to study harder for the tests because they didn't understand the homework as well. So all of this kind of, it goes hand in hand where if you choose your semesters and your professors wisely, you're going to have a lot easier time getting your work done, not because the classes are easier, but because sometimes the classes are better taught. And personally, if I could recommend one thing, stay away from any professor that likes a backwards classroom. It does not work for me, and I would say does not work for most students. If you don't know what a flipped classroom is or a backwards classroom, it's basically you learn the stuff outside of class, and then you go to lecture and you don't really do a whole lot. You're supposed to ask questions and stuff based on it, but you already did the stuff, so there's nothing to ask questions on. So that's my piece of advice. Stay away from that. Also, if you have to do circuits one, do Dr. Patrick. She's so much better than Rambo. And also digital logic. Bob does better if you want an A. If you have to take microprocessors, then Schwartz might be a better option. So sometimes it's like that, where if you have to do the next class, you might want to get a feel for the professor in a class that might be easier because your next class is going to be based on that. That covers it for me.
Personal opinion for databases, do Kavachi. He's really nice and he's really funny. He makes a bunch of like SpongeBob allegories whenever he's like building tables in SQL. He's like, oh yeah, SpongeBob has a 4.0 GPA. He's a hard worker, like stuff like that. And I feel like his classes are much more entertaining than the alternative professor who I completely forgot, but he's been teaching for ages. He's just not as cool.
Anyway, so yeah, obviously, again, friends who are upperclassmen, Discord, especially right now is midterm season. I'm sure if you guys go on those Discords, you're gonna see a lot of angry people right about now. Anyone you can ask to get you some information about a professor, take advantage of it because that knowledge could be the difference between you loving your semester and hating it. Now, another thing with choosing your classes is taking classes with unique projects. I'm pretty sure this is something that I've said to like some of y'all individually, but like want to like put this like on the record now. If you're trying to balance your classes and balance having side projects on your resume, ideally you'd want to put yourself in a situation where you can kill two birds with one stone. And there are several classes here at UF that allow you to do that, where you might be working on a semester project or a project near the end of your class that is different from person to person or group to group. And that's good because you can put that on your resume and recruiters aren't going to be like, oh, this is Minesweeper. Everyone else from UF had this. So I want to call out some of these classes by name. So most obvious one is Intro to Software Engineering. Again, everyone here has to take that. You work on a semester-long project with some other people. You're supposed to do the Agile Scrum stuff, which, I mean, you're supposed to do it. I'll just leave it there. But that's a chance for unique projects. Human-computer interaction, that's an elective where you will have to build a project with a functioning user interface. Fair warning, they don't teach y'all how to do it, so it's not like a React class. Basically, when I took it, my mentality is like, okay, I'm going to take this class to learn React, not because they're going to teach me, but because if I don't learn it, I'm literally not going to be able to turn in a project. And that's kind of how I like forced myself to get it done, basically. And I learned React and got an internship that summer, so worked out. Another one is data structures and algorithms. The final project for that class, you can use any tech stack or tool that you want. So that's also another great opportunity. I did like a C++ project for there, which worked out, but realistically, probably would have been better for me to branch out and use that as a good jumping off point to learn a new technology, especially since a lot of y'all taking that class will be sophomores and will be at that point where you're maybe really starting to get serious about looking for internships. Does anyone here have like any other classes they'd want to add to the list for this?
Okay, so we've entered into the danger territory of group projects. Group projects suck. Let's just be real about it, right? No one likes group projects, right? You're pretty much almost always the person who's doing most of the work. Somehow, some way, don't know how the math statistics on that works out, but that's how it does. And then by the end of it, you know, a lot of your grade is reliant on someone else finishing something at the last minute or even just clicking the submit button on time, which doesn't happen because their internet died or some other type of crazy thing. I've seen a lot of pain from that. I've experienced a lot of pain of it myself. I have been in classes where professors have intentionally placed me in groups with students who were not doing well in the class in order to increase their grade because I would do well in the project and they would not do so well and it would even out. Be careful, right? At the same time, group projects are something you have to get used to. You will be working with other developers, part in just normal things, but also, of course, in industry, you will be expected to communicate with people for everything. The one thing that I will say that is the nice thing is that if someone in industry is not pulling their weight in your group, they get fired. You all, unfortunately, do not have that luxury. If you're in group projects, look for places where you can partner up with people that you know. Prefer smaller groups to larger groups. Larger groups do not help. They add more complications and more problems. That's just my personal opinion. But this is from someone who's not really a fan of the whole group side of things. I like rubber ducking ideas off of people. I like communication, collaboration, that type of stuff. But I like to do so in pairs and not, you know, an entire mass group while trying to coordinate things because everyone has different goals. right? Your goal might be to get an A, their goal might be to pass the class. They are not the same goal. They're not close.
Also, on the topic of unique projects, if you can convince a professor to let you into their research project, even if it's small, then that's a great opportunity to work on a project, to put your name on a project that's probably going to be unique. And also teamwork, it's easier because the professor actually wants to get stuff done. So they handpick people they know would be able to get stuff done. So if you're interested in research, that's a good opportunity to build your resume.
Yeah, adding on to the whole group project thing, depends on the class. You it also kind of goes into the whole aspect about coordinating what classes you're going to take and when. If you have a certain friend that you know you work well with and you guys need to take the same class at a similar time, it might be worth trying to coordinate that together. So that way, if you have a semester project that you need to work on, you guys can both work on it and you will be with someone you trust. Great example of this is with programming language concepts. I don't know how Sanders handles it, but when Dobbins teaches it, you have the option to either do the project solo or with a partner. I did it with Michael, our VP, and it was a great experience. I had a lot of fun doing it, and I didn't really have to worry because I was working with someone who I trusted, I knew cared, and I knew was going to get good work done. And I'd say arguably since like around the second half of sophomore year, most of my group projects I've tried to source from like other SSD members to come work with me. So another benefit to getting to know your fellow people in this club, because again, if you're here, you're probably more motivated than the average student. So it's a good jumping off point.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe this is unpopular opinion, but definitely programming language concepts, I think, has a pretty interesting project, even if it's something that a lot of people do, because a lot of people end up taking PLC. It does. Oh, it is required now. Dang. Wow. Okay, I really am living in 2020. Definitely cool project. Good thing it's required. It's really interesting and it teaches you a lot about like the design of a programming language. And you definitely actually learn some pretty cool concepts that don't just apply in the context of programming language, but like just even, for example, this is like personal example, closures in PLC were a pretty huge thing when it came to being able to pass like functions into stuff like as first class citizens of the programming language. That actually ends up popping up if you're a web developer in React pretty often, because you're dealing more often than not with hooks that may or may not end up in you creating stale closures or some type of closure that messes up what you expect your React app to do. Definitely, if I hadn't gone to PLC, I wouldn't have understood what the hell was going on when my state wasn't updating, when I had a stale closure because of some crazy use state, use effect combination. So definitely PLC, really cool class. And oh yeah, I was going off of Param's point about research on the professors. Don't just look for professors in the computer science engineering curriculum. You'd be surprised at the amount of professors outside of computer science that are looking for computer science students. One specific case, and I believe he's actually still looking for students if anyone's interested, Dr. Christopher Peterson from the Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering Department. I was Mech Aero back then, about like a year ago. So he was looking for a lot of people that were interested in computer science because they're working with aerospace applications that do need some form of computer science knowledge. For example, OpenMCT. OpenMCT is the mission control monitoring software used by NASA for their rovers and for many different things, not just rovers, but drones. And basically, it's a modular dashboard that you can program using JSON to actually ingest data from a bunch of different sources using telemetry. We're going to be going over observability next week. Of course, I'm going to be leading that presentation, so I'll talk a little bit more about telemetry over there. But point is, look in the UF website and look around for all the different professors across all the different majors that are covered in UF, whether it be arts, business, aerospace engineering, chemical engineering. More often than not, they're looking for people who have some degree of experience or expertise with something in computer science. And they're more often than not looking for students because it's kind of like a requirement in their research. Like they want to like recruit students for their stuff. So definitely don't just look inside computer science professors. Reach out, see what you get. And if you do get a really nice project, that's going to separate you massively from other students that are just dealing with really run-of-the-mill computer science stuff, right? So 100% encourage you guys to do that. And reach out to Dr. Crispy. I can give you guys his email if you guys want for sure later. Yeah. Yes, actually, more often than not, there's more than just like if you're because when I went into Star Labs, which I actually didn't last much in because I got a different internship at a different place. I wasn't the only computer science student going in there, and there was a person that was like had more experience with computer science than me. Actually, it's Norman, who I think is an officer for ACM. If you've ever been to ACM, Norman, I forgot his last name, but he's really chill, and he's in the TEDx UF group as well. I think he's like the president or something. He was in that group, and he was pretty much like a mentor to me. So definitely look for groups where more, or if you want, if you have like friends that are in computer science that might have more experience with you, you can invite them over, try to do research with them. But yeah, but in cases where there isn't like a more senior computer science student, that is a drawback and something that you'd have to compensate for with your own research, of course. Definitely something that's there.
I just want to talk a little more about what Blake said, where sometimes when you're a good student, you get paired with bad students on purpose. I do know of people who, when you get a skill survey, might not be completely honest about how good they are at something. You can say that how many co-ops have you had? You say, oh, I never had any co-ops. I only had internships. So you write 0. That way, when you get paired with group mates, you're supposed to be the worst one in the team, but really you're not. It's not a way of getting out of doing work. It's a way of kind of leveling the playing field for yourself. And my understanding is that does not violate the UF honor code. So I think you're okay to do it. But I'm not recommending that you do it. I'm just saying that there are people who do it and there's nothing that happens to them.
Right. I'm gonna offer a contrarian viewpoint to your question. So you said was in aerospace engineering, right? Okay. So you're gonna get a lot more of an overlap with engineering values and practices. Also, aerospace robotics, the code there is important, right? The robot accidentally moves the wrong direction, and you go from a robot doing the right thing to a robot that no longer exists. So that might experience. Outside of that, particularly in areas of more kind of like industry or computational research, think chemistry, biology labs, and other stuff like that, you will see opportunities for computer science people. And the pecking order there is basically like the instructor, the PI, post behalf of grad students, research, and then like at the very bottom of whatever that list happens to be is you. Right. You could be like master's computer science. You could be like even a PhD student, but it's you, right? Because the work that you're doing is like the dirty work for them to present the results. That's about it. It has nothing to do with the actual research or results itself. And this is more true in those fields just to the nature of work, and that computer science isn't important to the research. It's the pulling it together. However, it's not valued there. That's also part of the reason why, on a side note, is that the code quality that you will see come out of those types of research things are often very bad. And you may be asked to inherit things that you cannot even begin to understand how it works. So you have to be very careful to not put yourself in a bad position like that, and it can definitely happen. So I forgot the other people I was going to mention, but that's okay. I think I've said the point. So it's not to say that like there are good opportunities and there are bad opportunities, but you have to be really careful because it's hard to find. Oh, that's what I mentioned. There was a computer science research group that was doing things in an area I was interested in, and I asked about it. And long story short, they were not interested in having someone contribute to the research, where I was like interested in the research. They were interested in having someone build a platform for the research, and that was it. And that was not valuable enough to me. So that's a good distinction. And that also goes back to the resume and other things like that, right? If what you did for the research is you built a data thing that basically takes an Excel spreadsheet and produces a graph out of the end of it, great, that's a valuable skill on its own, but it doesn't really have anything to do with the research. right? People will spin and present it, but I think a lot of people are decently good at kind of sniffing out that type of stuff, especially because it's more common nowadays. Same type of thing for internships, right? You will get asked questions. What did you do? Right? What did you contribute to? And they expect to see specifically, I did this on your resume, right? Your resume is an entire document, right? It's not about your group or your team. It's about you specifically.
Yeah, let me just kind of go through here. So we have some don'ts in terms of like time management. I'm just gonna pop all these up at once because they're kind of like inverses of what we had before. So we've already said don't feel like you need a 4.0. Again, that might vary a bit if you're interested in grad school, but if your main goal is industry, just make sure you have a GPA that's good enough. A 3.0 is what I like to say is a bare minimum. Again, taking classes with hard professors unnecessarily. Another thing that is really bad is waiting for a class to teach you a skill. Now this is something I'm pretty sure I've said to some of you guys like individually, but sometimes classes change depending on who the professor is teaching it. And let's say you had a class like Intro to Software Engineering, where some semesters they taught web development. I thought that was going to happen, and I signed up for a sophomore fall. But then they said, "Oh, we're going to make the class language agnostic this semester," and basically that meant that our projects had to be on our own using whatever tech stack we had to research. And I kind of got hung out to dry on the learning web development thing, and I basically had to go and learn that myself. So I learned that the hard way. Hopefully, you guys won't have to. If there is a skill that you're interested in and you want to learn, like don't wait for a class. Professors can change, curriculums can change, and maybe even the tooling itself can change. I know that there's like a special topics web dev class and this spring that uses like PHP and like jQuery and stuff. It's like you're building a website like it's 2008. So if you're looking into building something like React or Next, which the SSD website team is a great project to get involved in if you're interested in that. Don't wait. And again, with balancing classes too, sometimes if there's a class on a topic that you're interested in, depending on how hard the class is, if it's a super hard class but you're interested in it, it might not be the best use of your time if you still have a lot of the other things that you need to get done, such as projects and stuff. That really kind of comes down to you, how much free time you have, and what kind of things need to get done. Okay, and another big one too, rushing if you don't need to. This one's kind of controversial because I know that some people are looking to basically get in and out and graduate as quickly as possible. And sometimes there are some very real reasons for doing that, right? Naturally, not all of us are paying the exact same amount for school. Some of us have scholarships, some don't. Some are from in-state, some are from out of state. For a lot of us, finishing school quicker might mean a lot less debt to pay off or something like that. And so, if you have like a big incentive like that to finish as quickly as you can, feel free. But what I like to say is that if you have the luxury of being able to finish your degree a bit slower, by all means take it. Because if you're taking less classes each semester, it gives you time to do better on each individual class. It gives you more time to get involved with projects, gives you more time to get involved with clubs like us. You're eligible for internships for longer, right? And the more internships you can stack up on your resume before you graduate, the more attractive you're going to be to companies. So kind of having that time to spread things out a bit, and also the more time you have, the more flexibility you have at your classes, especially if you do your research early, like we said, because then you can kind of try to spread things out a bit. So again, if you have the luxury of maybe doing all 4 years, go ahead. And depending on some of your situations, if you guys already had scholarships coming in and you're an in-state student and maybe you get some internship money, that might be enough to do it to kind of keep you covered throughout all of college. So again, my personal opinion, don't rush if you don't need to.
something along those same lines with paying for school. Somebody is paying for you to be here. It might be someone you know, it might be you, and it might be the state of Florida. You might get scholarships, but because of that, that means that this school is yours, and you should be exploring it and figuring out everything that's around here. Me myself, I this year have basically learned as much about the school this year and places that you can do and where things happen as I did the previous 3 years. And I wish that wasn't the case. I wish I had learned more in my freshman, sophomore, and junior years. Figure out what's going on campus. There's a lot of buildings that I never entered before this year, and I'm just trying to tell you guys that you should explore and figure out what's going on campus instead of, you don't want anything to pass you by. Never, be like, oh, it could have been me, right?
Okay, yeah, so honestly, I thought that point might have been a bit more controversial. I know I've had like debates with some people over that idea before, but I'm gonna say no because it's already 7:02. Yeah. Um, but the whole idea of the financial aspect of it brings us into the next point I wanted to bring up, which was money. So obviously this is kind of important because money is a big reason why a lot of people decide to go into computer science in the first place. And the problem with that, and you might not know it yet if you're a freshman and all you know about CS is from watching TikToks or day in the life videos on YouTube, sometimes it's not all that it's cracked up to be. And if you get the wrong idea of what to expect coming in, you could get burned really badly. And the last thing we want to happen is you guys find out some of the stuff when you've already invested a few years into the degree, and switching majors would maybe push your graduation back a few years, or you might decide it's not worth trying to switch up again. So, number one, influencers are not reliable sources of information most of the time. Again, your meter for being able to detect BS is going to go up with experience, but again, I would say generally the shorter form content is the less reliable it is, because generally simple answers, and goes to a lot of things in life, simple answers usually are leaving some important details out. And a big example, for example, is money, right? Now, a lot of people, they come into this degree thinking, oh, I'm going to become a programmer. I'm going to get a job at Thing and I'm going to make 6 figures right out of school. When the reality is most developers don't make that much out of school, especially in Florida. And I've got some statistics here to kind of back this up. So this right here shows the national average for entry-level software engineering jobs throughout the entire country. So it's about 90,000 a year. So shy of 6 figures, contrary to what, a lot of the talking heads on social media might tell you. And again, this is just the average for the whole country. So naturally, a lot of people who are in these big tech cities getting really big salaries, they're going to be pulling those numbers up a little bit. One of the most important factors in your salary is going to be where your job is located. So let's go ahead and look at this by state. Now, fun fact, Florida is actually dead last in this category. Again, if you want to look at this data yourself, it's the same source as the previous slide. You can go there. We're going to post the slides to this as soon as we're done with the workshop. But the average entry-level software engineer in Florida only makes about $67,000 right out of school. Now, that is a lot less than 6 figures a year. And, based on numbers I've heard from friends and other people who have gotten offers with kind of local companies, that number seems pretty realistic to me. So you really need to take into account that you might not be getting as much money as you think. And, I don't know of anyone who's done it specifically, but you might be thinking, okay, it's good to rack up a big bill while you're in college because you'll get the money to pay for it later. And then you realize, oh, wait, I'm not making nearly as much as I thought I would. Another really big aspect for this is cost of living. Do you know the reason why developers in cities like San Francisco or Seattle might be more likely to make 6 figures? The rent is insane. Well, let me show you some rent prices for some tech hubs. So for San Francisco, right? Silicon Valley, home of the tech boom. Your average rent there is going to run you about $3,000 per year, per month, which is about $35,000 a year. Okay. Seattle, a little bit cheaper. It's going to run you about 2,000 a month. That still comes out to 23,000 yearly. And I can say, because I lived in Seattle this summer for my internship, depending on the area, again, this is an average. The place I was staying at this summer ran me 2,400 a month. And especially because a lot of offices tend to be in nicer areas because developers make money. If you want to live somewhere near where you work, you might have to pay a premium in rent. So I would say that this number is a little too conservative from what I've looked at. And then really bad, New York, you're looking at an average of $4,000 monthly. That is $50,000 a year, just for rent before any of your expenses come out. This isn't taxes, food, medical expenses, anything else you might be paying for. This is just to live. Crazy thing too is I'm pretty sure New York developer salaries aren't even that high compared to the West Coast. So, moral of the story: don't live in New York if you want to save money. But, yeah, a six-figure salary isn't necessarily going to make you rich, especially when you're paying prices like these just to have a place to live. And to really drive this home, I saw this last week, and I assume everyone knows who the 49ers are, right? They're San Francisco's football team. This guy's an NFL quarterback. He's making millions of dollars per year. Even he still has a roommate in San Francisco. So imagine what that means for the rest of us. I
Yeah. Another fun, not so fun statistic in that regard. I think it's like 80% of professional athletes go broke after like 5 years when they're done. Right. Yeah. So there's that situation too. But more on topic. So you brought up rent is one of the main things. Rent is huge. The reason. You also brought up basically companies will offer different salaries and payments based on where you're located as far as a cost of living normalization. There's a couple factors to this. The simplest one is that they can get away with it, right? That is the most blunt, simple one. The short answer is if you do the same job, then okay. The other argument is that the pay is somewhere in the middle, and if you have a lower cost of living, then that goes to support people who have a higher cost of living, and so the effective lifestyle that we're paying you for the job is somewhat balanced out. I'll leave you to pick up your own interpretation on what's what. However, note that not every company does that. For instance, mine does not, right? So I have the same salary as my coworkers that live in Denver. Or at least the one who get paid the same that I do. Actually, that's a very recursive. Never mind, not the point. Point is, however, I have an advantage over them on two things. Well, one is cost of living, but the other one is that Florida's at the bottom there, but Florida has no income tax, right? If you've never really had a part-time job or some other things, if you have an internship stuff, you've seen it. But if you've never really looked at the significance of something like that, that's a pretty big chunk, right? Florida has just zero income tax. I think it's like 7.5% at DC, which is one of the higher ones. I don't know if it goes higher anywhere else from there. But it would be a 7.5%, cut to my salary to move to DC before I pay for the additional cost of living and everything else like that. Right. So that's another factor to keep in mind. I think you have a slide on it, but now I want to mention.
Yeah. I do. Well, we might have time to talk about that more later, but specifically on the income taxing, if you guys get like an internship and you're maybe considering California or Washington, because those are some of the bigger tech hubs, Washington also does not have state income tax. Keep in mind, as we just showed, the rent there is pretty expensive, but California and New York both do have state income tax. Washington does not. So just maybe something to keep in mind when you guys get offers. Did any of y'all have?
If you do work in California too, you have to submit basically give them a bunch of information, and they will kind of follow you for the rest of your life. They keep wanting your money. They'll send you like a bill the next year too. And you have to tell them, you have to prove that you didn't live in California. So I know that that's the case for California. I don't know if that's the case for other places too, but I've had friends where that they have a problem with that.
I guess like on the opposite side of like not earning much money but having to pay a lot of rent. In the case where you're earning a lot of money because you're working in a big company or like some crazy company like Amazon, Netflix, some government contractor like Palantir or whatever, like pay special attention to like your mental health because more often than not, these people are paying you like 200,000, 300,000 fresh out of college because they're gonna kill you. Like they're gonna overwork you like a mule. Like I've gone to like the Glassdoor reviews for Palantir, and people keep saying like you have to have Mensa IQ to be in this company. Like you're gonna be working day in, day out, Wolf of Wall Street. Like you're gonna be like 48 hours in a day working in terms of like pumping out value for the government, crazy surveillance software, catching Mossad, whatever, like crazy stuff going. Like they're gonna have you working so hard that you might end up burning out as a software engineer and not enjoying what you thought you would have enjoyed for like the rest of your life, right? So definitely something to keep into account, not just in terms of like money. Keep into account the culture, the type of work you're expected to be doing. Ask around, ask the recruiters even like how the culture is over there. And some of them are gonna lie because I was talking to Palantir and they lied. They said, "Oh yeah, if you really want it, you're gonna get it. Like you're just gonna like, you know, we don't hire non-hard workers here." I was like, bro, like just be real with me, right? Like money in the end isn't everything, right? We need money to live, but you can't let money take your life away from you. And that goes for a lot of companies out there that have a very high, like stapled on like price for entry level software engineers, but might end up having you like burn out your dopamine receptors at like 1 a.m. working on some irrelevant project that they're going to throw in the bin for no reason, right? So stuff like that.
Yeah, so kind of going back to what Blake mentioned about savings. Uh this is something else that a lot of you guys might want to see because for a lot of us, you know, the money that you might make as a software engineer might be more you've seen in a year than in your entire life, especially if you don't come from a rich family. However, this and again, we have the source in the side here if you want to look at some of this yourself. 47% of people in America who make six figures a year are still living paycheck to paycheck. That is like incredible. And you would think that would be a number for, you know, just the population in general. This is specifically people who make over $100,000 a year. If you had a room full of people who made that much money, half of them would still be living paycheck to paycheck. And, you know, that's for a few reasons. Like we mentioned, it's not as much money as you might expect between rent, taxes, inflation, everything like that. But it's also very easy to kind of like let your lifestyle inflate once you kind of get money for the first time too. So that is one thing to be aware of. Um, Especially because with industries like this that can be kind of boom and bust sometimes. I think it's a good idea to save up a bit for a rainy day. If you were one of the people who got into like a FANG company during the hiring frenzy the last few years and you made a bunch of money, but you spent it all, well, let's say you just got laid off, that money's not going to be able to help you now. And, you know, you might maybe have to take a lower paying job at a smaller company. Maybe things will improve again when the market improves. But for now, a lot of money that you could have had as a nest egg that might have given you breathing room, that might have maybe given you an opportunity to wait longer to be more selective with your jobs because you're not running out of money to live. There's just a lot of factors there. So I really want to like just emphasize the importance of learning about personal finance. Because again, like I said, for a lot of us, once we graduate, we're going to be making more money than, you know, some of us have ever really seen in our lives before. Yeah, I also did want to add another short point. Again, this is how influencers might mislead you. You might hear someone at a big tech company say, "Oh, I make 150K TC, 200K TC." That does not mean they are getting $150,000 cash. Pretty much anytime you have a very large pay like that, especially at a large tech company. By the way, TC stands for total compensation. And that basically means everything that the company gives you. And only part of your pay is going to be in cash. So typically a lot of your pay will be in stock options, right? And this is tricky because there are restrictions in basically when you can sell those stocks, right? So I'm assuming that everyone here has a basic like understanding of what like a stock is and like that. So the way it's structured varies from company to company, but somewhere like Amazon, they only let you sell 5% of the stocks in your offer your first year, right? So let's say you get an offer there. Amazon says they're going to give you 3,000 stocks. You're only allowed to sell 5% of that in your first year. And if you leave, and again, like Angel was saying, some of these companies, they pay you a lot because they'll work you to death. If you leave early, the remaining stocks that were in your contract are forfeited. So again, if you work for Amazon for a year and you only got 5% your first year and then quit, went somewhere else, you would be leaving out 95% of the money that you had gotten in your offer. So there's also the fact that you have to pay your income tax and capital gains tax when you actually sell the stock to convert it to cash. And again, like we said, if you leave early, you forfeit whatever money remained. So again, if someone is telling you, if someone is saying the phrase TC, it stands for total compensation, and they are not making that number in cash. And again, that's something that there'd really be no way for like most of us to know as freshmen that you kind of realize when you're a senior and you're like, oh, this isn't nearly as much money as I thought it was.
So there's a few things on this. One is that some other things that factor into total compensation that you can see. Things like vacation time or sick leave, other stuff like that can factor in. If you're on a salary, they might say, hey, your salary equates to this amount a day. You get 20 days sick leave. That's, whatever that a bonus to your total compensation. Vacation, maybe sick leave, that one's a lot sketchier. But they will leverage that in order to increase whatever that total compensation number is. Benefits as well, right? Benefits is a huge thing. They have a variety of ways to throw things at that, but they generally don't take into account individual situations, right? What might mean is like myself, who is, single, does not have children, does not have the same benefit, pun intended, from benefits, right? If I had children who needed medical care or doing this, that, or the other, or just standard other things with the family, that might be a lot more valuable to me. Those numbers generally don't take that into account. They generally do averages or whatever effectively they pay the benefits company to provide, that gets factored in. And that's going to be more for you on average when starting your career. The other thing I was mentioning, stocks. So there is stocks and then there is options. Do not fall into the trap of confusing them. There is stocks and there are options. I do not even know well enough to explain the concrete differences between them, and they have very different rules to it. But in short, some companies will say, you get this stock. This is yours. You own it, whatever. Others will give you options, which basically means that you have the ability, we can't say no, but you have the ability to purchase stock if you want them. For reference, I have options. Guess which are worse. Now, so basically one way to think about this is with any type of options is, do I want to play the game of stock trading with the company that I work at? Right? That's the question, right? Another question is, would I play the game of stock trading at a company that I didn't work at? Right? And if the answer to those are no, then maybe just don't even worry about it. And I know a lot of people, and there's prevailing theory on it for, at least a trend, that's basically just like, the second you get stock, sell it. Be done with it. Not your problem, right? If you hold on to it, you're basically gambling, right? Am I going to do the gamble for things, or am I going to take an extra 3,000 or whatever it is as part of my salary, right? Pay attention to that in general. Read the fine print of contracts and stuff. Ask people for help, right? Parents, hopefully, friends, workers, people who have graduated who are a year or 2 years senior. They are not authorized to give legal advice, but they can hopefully give you some of the non-legal advice that can sometimes be a little bit more valuable. So,
Not only what Blake was saying about the shares, when you get them from your company, I've heard this advice given, and I think it's pretty good. Not only are you gambling with that, it also basically you're doubling down on your company doing well. So let's say you are a good worker and you're trying to be a good worker, but your company sees hard times and you get laid off. Well, if you got laid off now, and because your company wasn't doing well, now your stock, that the shares that you own of that company are also lower value. So well, that could happen, but uh, also the way options work, sometimes you don't have to gamble when you buy them because sometimes they give you the option to buy them at 25 cents when they're worth $1. So they're just giving you 75 cents if you just sell them right away. So options aren't always bad. Sometimes companies just do that because it's easier to structure the contracts with options versus giving you something, because then they have to pay tax on that too. Never mind. That's too much to say. Basically, a lot of people say that you shouldn't hold stock of your company because you're doubling down. And that's basically all I wanted to say.
Yeah. And all this, it's not to suggest that you guys need to go out and become the Wolf of Wall Street, but I think personally a basic understanding of finance and business will really help you, not just make better financial decisions for yourself once you graduate, but will also kind of help it make sense when companies do something strange. You might know why, for example, with interest rates right now, if you know how that works, why there's less hiring right now in the tech industry, and kind of understanding what goes into some of the business and financial decisions these companies make can help you kind of maneuver things a little bit better in a lot of different ways. That would probably take another half hour to have a discussion on, but especially in the personal finance part, I recommend just please, if you've never learned a thing about it, some basic financial literacy will do you wonders for your whole life. So,
all right, I'll say two things that I think will transition to whatever last questions or whatever. N equals 1. I wish I took more finance classes. Caveat to that is you can just audit classes, right? I mean, I can technically audit classes because it's a public university and stuff, but it, be nice to ask the professor, okay? But there are going to be classes outside your major that are a risk to take, right? I took 1 or 2 risky classes. They did not go so well, and I kind of strayed off of that. You don't have to take these classes for a grade per se, right? You may not get the whole assignments or other things, but a number of professors are aware that many people will audit their classes and have things set up where you can say get access to their Canvas assignments and other things like that. The instructor may not grade them for you, but the resources themselves can be nice. And of course, you have lectures and other things like that. Something to consider, right? Considering hey, maybe I'll try it and see how it goes. Maybe it'll be good. Well, but you can audit classes and not have that be a risk to your GPA. Of course, that means you're putting time into something that is not going into your GPA. So balance that with what you want. So in my case, I was more interested in the material than the grade because I knew the grade that I was going to get at the end of the day was not going to be too good anyways, because it was not my forte. So yeah. Okay, I think we should transition into questions now and stuff. Does anyone have questions? Yeah. I don't think any of us know of that. So that is a great question. Does anyone else know of this? Okay, there you go. Well, we'll report on it next week. So 2 pages, double space, standard nonsense. All right. Yeah, something like that. I don't know. Yeah. All right. Have either of you 3 thought about that? Serious? Okay. Yes. So both of us have done masters. I think I'll start on the master side and then we'll get some contrarian perspective. The short answer for things is, I work on my own programming language. I've been working on it for about 5.5 years. Started as a hobby project, turned into something where I very deeply started researching programming language theory. I learned many of the fundamentals. I read a lot of papers. I learned more languages. I can probably program at least basic stuff in more languages than most people have ever heard of. And I developed a variety of new techniques that I thought could improve things. So that built upon like existing top research, solved a lot of problems, and even ran into one of those last night, which was very frustrating because I thought I would have known better, but I didn't. Anyways, so for me, I was always interested in the more researchy side of things, right? A master's was the opportunity to do the actual master's research. So I had the thesis and the research side of things for that, to take some of the more advanced classes for it, the graduate programming language class, the graduate one on, computational theory and other things. And overall, it came at a convenient time kind of over COVID where, hey, job market isn't great. There's a lot of weird wishy-washy opportunities. Not sure what else to get to. Let's do it. The other thing is University of Florida Computer Science has a combined master's program. So you can take master's classes while an undergraduate, and some number of credits for that will count to your degree. And so that meant I could get a master's within 1 year, as opposed to, say, a year and a half normally. Because taking, 15 credits of master's classes, like actual master's classes, 2 semesters in a row, is generally seen as pretty rough to do, right? I did, I think, 3 classes, which was the maximum during my undergrad, and then I did a 12 and a 3 semester.
The only thing to add, if you're actually serious about it, apply early so that UF is not your only option. That might be the easy option because you just continue going to UF and your credits transfer if you take master's classes, but you might be able to get better opportunities. So if you apply early and like build your profile for grad school, you might be able to get something much better than UF.
Yeah, speaking of combined masters, if you are in the program, that is effectively acceptance to the master's program at UF. So you do not need to go through another application process afterwards. So once you're in, right? So I applied to PhD things, didn't get good results, took the master's offer because I've had it since I was in the program. All right.
Blake basically covered everything that I think is important to think about when you're taking a master's. I know some people, I have a friend who's a PhD student and he doesn't want to go into industry. He just wants to stay in education for his whole life. He's doing electrical engineering now. So he's working on that, and that's a decision that you can make. And all of the factors that Blake talked about, like the job market, the interest in doing research, perhaps maybe you don't have a whole lot of industry experience and you're a little bit afraid of trying to get into that. And I will say a master's degree will help you get a job, and it will help you get a better paying job. So it definitely has value. And that's not the reason I'm choosing not to do it. It's not because I don't see value in it. It's just because I don't have that interest in research, and I'd rather start working in industry. So I think same people can have the same like ideas about what a master's program is going to do for you and make different decisions based upon that.
So let me do a follow-up. Not that I disagree. Everything you said is accurate. The other piece that is said is in research, going into industry is not a bad option as well, right? Make money faster, make more career experience. It's the career experience that really counts when it comes to applying other jobs and things. Sometimes the masters can be like a kind of nudge to get you into the first job or get you up to like point. Most of the time, things like that in PhD tend to be like more longer term career growth trajectory things, right? Where like, hey, you have a master's, the research side of things, that might mean like, you can tackle this kind of experimental project or whatever else type of thing is going on there, right? So there's a mix, right? I'd say it's probably a nudge. It sets you back a bit, and the hope is that it'll catch up, Okay, let me answer the natural follow-up question, which is, when do you go for a PhD or not? So I've decided not to go for a PhD. In my particular area, there is not a lot of research that is what I would consider industry valuable. It is very theoretical on the programming language side. Things like TypeScript. So like if you want to do the stuff that like powers TypeScript, and by powers, I mean math behind TypeScript, go wild. Half the stuff that you're doing is not been implemented in like any language other than crazy TypeScript nonsense and maybe some weird extension for Haskell. And no one uses Haskell. So that was one of the things. I had more of an industry streak, right? I want to contribute to things that are meaningful to industry. And I reached a certain point where it's like, you know, the master's was a huge step in like my confidence and my ability to like write papers, do research and all kinds of things. So I did a thesis for it, right? So it was like 30-page paper of, 8 months of research onto things. And that built on other stuff I was doing too. So it was, very deep in that regard. And the PhD just didn't do anything farther to really help with that, right? When you do a PhD, you're working with another professor in order to advance generally whatever their research is. And your goal is to find someone where their goals kind of align with your goals, right? And then you work from there, right? Okay, and then you get a PhD, and then what? Well, if you got a PhD, then your options are basically industry research or academia research. And both of those are relatively bleak, right? Going into academia is rough, very rough. The odds are against you, and it is heavily luck-based, far more luck-based than people will say. So the prevailing advice from many people who will talk about this openly on the academia side is don't do it, right? So that meant for me, factor in everything else. Master's is valuable for, say my own, pleasure, research it, have some fun with it, learn a bit. PhD is just not worth it. Just takes such a long time, especially in US, right? US PhD is much longer than say European PhD. Very different areas. Okay, anyways, maybe one more question. Or 0 more questions.
Add just really quickly a couple more points for someone who has decided against getting a master's. One thing is also considering what your day-to-day is going to be like. If you're someone who doesn't really enjoy classes or school that much, might be something to take into account. I know after doing a couple of internships that I kind of just enjoy working in industry a lot more. The day-to-day work of doing it is something that I find a lot more enjoyable. So ideally, if you can get yourself an internship as early as possible and try to figure that out before you make the decision, that could be very helpful. It was helpful for me. Another thing is that in some fields, academia might be where the cutting edge stuff is happening, not in computer science. At any given time, industry is always going to be ahead of academia. So if your interest is really working on cutting edge stuff, I don't know how this goes in other fields typically, but academia tends to run behind industry in computer science. So that's something else to keep in mind. And another thing too is also, the money aspect. Now, depending on how you did in undergrad, there might be scholarship opportunities available. Again, I don't know the details about that. And if you did some internships, then you might have a little bit of money that could, maybe give you a buffer and give you more flexibility to decide this. But I know for a fact that graduate credits are more expensive than undergrad credits. So do keep in mind that the time that you're spending in a master's program is time that you could potentially be spending making money. And on one final note, I know that's, again, this might be more common in other fields. Some companies will pay you to get a master's. And I know if you get something like an MBA, that's pretty common. Again, I don't know how frequently that happens with computer science just because of how much faster industry is, but you can always I don't want to say you can always come back because some people, once they graduate, school might not ever be on their radar again. But from a monetary aspect, getting your graduate degree might be something you look into after you've saved up for a bit, or you might have someone else who wants to basically pay the bill for that.
Makes normally night classes of some type. You do split, so you do some type of split for it. Sometimes they'll give you like a degree of time off, right? Like some type of portion for things or class, but it varies. The extreme ones will basically say, go and get a master's and then come back for a year and do some stuff. So, yeah. Varies, but a lot of the larger companies that have programs like that have partnerships with the universities for it. So, and there are some programs that are specifically for like masters in industry, right? So I know like Carnegie Mellon, which is #1 computer science, university, has options specifically for like X in industry for a lot of things like that. What about, there's one ad, but I forgot what it is. So we're just going to stop here. So thanks all. If you're web dev people, stick around, come see me afterwards up here, and I'll pass it to Jonas for whatever else.
Yeah, I do have one last kind of closing note. So this went by a lot faster than I was kind of expecting. By a show of hands here, who would be interested in a similar kind of fireside chat like this at some point in the future? Yeah. Nice. So yeah, we probably won't be doing this exact kind of thing again this semester. But maybe next semester we'll see how things go. As far as workshops go, next week, Angel is going to be doing a workshop on logging and observability, which might not, it's one of those things that's really important in industry. No one ever really tells you about it in college. And week after that, we'll be doing a basic intro to backend workshop for anyone who wants to get set up there. And yeah, that's it for tonight. I'll go ahead and hand it off.
I got the thing. Yeah, for the panel stuff, I think we talked a lot about the education and sometimes the either higher degree or industry stuff. But I think one thing we didn't really talk about at all was, okay, how do I learn computer science? Right? Like we talked about the class and stuff, but we didn't really talk at all about like, what are the resources? If classes aren't that good for learning things, how do I do that? So maybe that would be a good follow-up. Does that sound of interest? So seeing the chunk of nods. Okay, cool. Then all right, Jonas, you. Where did the chair go? Oh, yep, we're a wrap. Let's